Hello everyone. Before any launch in the pharmaceutical industry, the medical affairs teams are deeply immersed in real groundwork, generating evidence, running medical education programs, engaging with key opinion leaders, shaping clinical narratives, and preparing the scientific foundation that the whole launch will eventually stand on. But while we are busy doing this essential work, something else quite happens inside the organizations. The commercial and marketing teams often take the lead in internal communication. They update the leadership regularly, showcase progress through dashboards and presentations, and they align closely with cross-functional teams. From access to regulatory, training, operations with everyone, and they make their work visible. Meanwhile, medical affairs teams, despite doing some of the most strategic and intellectually demanding work to prepare for the launch, we often remain silent. Maybe we assume that our contribution speaks for itself, or we assume that the leadership already knows what we are doing, or that our communication about our progress might appear promotional. And that silence is really very costly. Because when the launch succeeds, the spotlight naturally falls on the teams who have been consistently visible. The teams that has been updating and aligning everyone along the journey, the marketing team. The marketing team appear like the engine behind the success, while the medical team, the very group that paved the way 2 years earlier for this launch, becomes a silent partner. Take care. It is not about competing for recognition. It's about claiming rightful visibility for the scientific impact. The reality is that communication drives perception. If we don't tell our story ourselves internally, someone else will shape it for us. That's why an effective launch communication strategy for medical affairs must include not only the external activities that we do, but also a detailed internal communication plan. A plan that ensures that leadership, our leadership, cross-functional teams, and the wider organization understand how the medical function has been shaping the field, engaging with experts, and guiding the science long before the first commercial message ever appears. And remember, visibility is not vanity. It's part of the strategic leadership. And when we as medical affairs teams master the internal communication, we will gain recognition, influence, trust, and a strong voice in shaping the future launches. Now, if you agree that communication is the missing link between impact and recognition, let's talk about how to fix it. Every successful launch requires a structured medical affairs communication plan, as I said, one that ensures that both internal and external stakeholders receive the right message at the right time and in the right format. This plan should cover 3 key phases: the pre-launch phase, the launch phase, and the post-launch phase. And it addresses 2 parallel audiences: external, and this includes key opinion leaders, investigators, healthcare professionals, scientific societies, regulatory, payer stakeholders, patient advocacy groups, and internal stakeholders, including cross-functional teams, leadership teams, affiliates, and other field teams. So let's break this framework down step by step. And let's start with the pre-launch communication plan. The pre-launch communication plan is probably the most critical stage. It often begins 12 to 24 months before the launch. And the goal here is to shape the understanding, create alignment, and the anticipation. And the objective of the external communication here should be 3. First, educate and shape the landscape, where you introduce the unmet medical needs and the preliminary data through scientific exchange, congresses and advisory board, and so. The second objective is to engage with and map the key opinion leader engagements. And here, you need to build a trusted, relationships and identify early adopters who will guide local implementation. And the third objective is to create the scientific narrative, define the consistent story that links disease burden, evidence, and expected patient outcomes. On the other hand, the objectives of the internal communication during the pre-launch stage is one, to align internally on scientific messaging, ensure every team member, whether medical, access, marketing, regulatory, understand the same core narrative. The second objective is to share the progress and insights regularly, using newsletter, internal webinars, cross-functional updates to communicate the evidence generation milestones and field insights. If this will not happen during the pre-launch phase, it won't be supportive afterwards. So in the pre-launch phase, 2 years earlier before the launch, you have to start communicating what you are doing regarding the data generation, how you are processing the key opinion leader medical insights. And the third objective is to prepare internal ambassadors, train medical, commercial colleagues on the compliant evidence-based discussions to maintain consistent across all touch points. So this is the pre-launch communication plan and its objectives. And so the outcome in this phase is the internal readiness, external awareness, setting the stage for a confident, unified launch moment. And then we come to the second phase, which is the launch communication plan, communicating during the launch. And this is where scientific storytelling meets the visibility. And here the goal is to communicate with clarity, confidence, and agility, both externally and internally. So let's say that for the external communications, the objectives will be: 1, to deliver key data effectively, leverage Congress symposia, publication releases, and virtual engagements to share pivotal results. Enhance the accessibility, simplify complex data using visuals, infographics, digital platforms to reach healthcare professionals at scale. And the third external objective will be to enable two-way dialogue, gather feedback from the early prescribers or stakeholders, capture new clinical questions, and feed them back to the medical plan. On the other hand, the internal communication plan for the launch phase is very important. This is the time that you showcase medical affairs leadership. And the objectives of the internal communication during this launch phase are: 1, to showcase medical affairs leadership. Regularly brief senior management on scientific engagement outcomes, key opinion leader feedback, and adoption trends. Align with cross-functional teams, maintain active participation with them in the launch meetings to ensure medical insights guide decision-making. And finally, regarding internal communication, you need to provide real-time field updates. Create channels for MSLs and medical managers to share engagement insights, highlighting the scientific insights that influence the ongoing strategies. The outcome of this phase is visibility. Medical affairs is seen as a leading team, data-driven voice shaping the launch execution in real time. Then we come to the final stage, which is the post-launch communication. After the product enters the market, the goal shifts from awareness and visibility to sustainability, encouraging continuous education, evidence expansion, and medical credibility. The objective here for external communication are: 1, to reinforce the education, and here you need to conduct follow-up meetings, webinars, data updates to address new clinical questions and strengthen the physician confidence. The second objective is to monitor real-world feedback, gather data on patient outcomes, safety data to support the life cycle of the product, and to support the evidence generation. And you need to maintain the visibility continue engaging with scientific societies, patient advocacy groups, and regional experts to maintain and sustain scientific leadership. The objective of the internal communication plan in this phase is to report medical impact, share the evidence of how medical activities influence adoption, clinical outcomes, and scientific perception. And let me pause here, because that's what we are good at. We wait for this phase in order to communicate. But imagine how the medical impact and influence would be if we start the communication from the pre-launch phase. Pre-launch phase through the launch phase and then the post-launch phase. So it is very important that before reaching this stage, we keep the communication at a high level. The second objective here internally is to update strategy dynamically. Feed the real-world insights back into the brand and medical plans for adaptive decision-making. The third objective is to celebrate the scientific contribution. Now that your leadership teams, cross-functional teams, were engaged during the pre-launch phase and the launch phase, now they are ready to celebrate with you your scientific contribution. And here you need to showcase the medical team's role in sustaining the therapy long-term success. This can happen, again, through internal newsletters, recognition forums, and cross-functional storytelling. And here you can use, of course, you can use data storytelling in all phases, but here it will be well-shaped because you will have some results and some outcomes to share. The outcome expected from the post-launch phase is the long-term credibility, whether internally or externally. So the medical affairs here position themselves as the continuous scientific backbone of the product, not just the pre-launch engine or partner. Now let me share with you a recipe for success. From my own experience, and I have been fortunate enough to be part of launching some of the biggest medical breakthroughs in our industry over the last 30 years, I can tell you this. During the three phases of any launch, pre-launch, the launch, and post-launch, there is one factor that consistently makes a profound difference. It's involving the leadership and cross-functional teams actively in the medical initiatives, not just keeping them informed. Too often, medical affairs limits communication to reports, dashboards, and summaries, sending updates through slides, emails about what has been achieved. That's good, but reporting is not the same as engaging. If you want medical affairs to gain the visibility and influence, you need to open the doors, invite leaders, commercial colleagues, and access partners to witness the impact of your work and to see your plans being built in front of them before, during, and after the launch. When a leader attends a medical advisory board, for example, observing the depth of the scientific discussion, or sits in a medical education session where experts exchange with the medical team different ideas openly, the experience stays with them. They don't just hear about medical affairs from the commercial team, but actually they see it, they feel it, and they understand its value. This kind of exposure creates a transformation in how leadership perceives the medical function. Yes, it's a transformation. Why engaging the leadership and the cross-functional team is a transformation? First, they learn the science behind the strategy. When they participate in medical initiatives early in the pre-launch phase, they gain a deeper understanding of the scientific reasoning that underpins the commercial strategy. They begin to appreciate how the clinical data, patient pathways, and key opinion leader insights all converge to make the launch successful. And this scientific appreciation adds enormous depth to their commercial perspective. It allows them to speak not just about the product performance, but about the science that drives it. The second reason why this is a breakthrough initiative is because the leadership and cross-functional team, when they are engaged in the medical initiatives, when they attend and see what you are doing, they become proud advocates of scientific excellence. Most leaders are naturally drawn to celebrate success stories. And usually, those stories are about strong sales performance or smart marketing approaches. But when the leaders experience the excellence of medical affairs, they gain a whole new narrative to share. They talk about how their organization is leading science. They become genuinely proud to highlight the brilliance of their medical teams and experts and the authenticity of the scientific partnership you have built. And that pride matters because it changes the tone of the organization. It shifts the internal narrative from we sell well to we launch with science and integrity. The third reason why this is a smart idea to engage leadership and cross-functional teams in the early launch activities by medical team is because they strengthen cross-functional alignment. Active participation of those leaders and those cross-functional teams builds empathy and collaboration. And when commercial or access teams attend medical sessions, they see how evidence and engagement pave the way for market success. It encourages mutual respect, breaks silos, and fosters a sense of shared ownership of the launch outcomes. And finally, when they attend and participate actively, they amplify the medical affairs impact. That's true. A leader who has witnessed the value of medical activities firsthand becomes an ambassador. They start referencing those experiencing in internal meetings, town halls, and regional interviews. They mention the strengths of scientific partnerships, the credibility of the experts in the organization, and the medical leadership behind the success, giving the medical function the visibility it truly deserves. Try this because it never failed. That's why I always encourage medical colleagues, don't just report, invite, don't just update, involve. Because every leader who joins your medical journey becomes a long-term ally in amplifying your impact. Remember, data tells a story, but experience builds belief. When leadership sees the science in action, when leadership sees the science in action, the genuine dialogue with experts, the evidence-shaping decisions, the patient-centered purpose, they carry that story forward and share it further. They become not just supporters of medical affairs, but true advocates of science-led excellence. And that's how you move from visibility to influence and from participating to delivering impact. So, ladies and gentlemen, in order to wrap up, you have seen how medical affairs stands strong at the heart of every successful launch, shaping the science, building credibility, and driving the evidence that turns innovation into real clinical impact. Yet, too often, our work stays behind the scenes, quietly fueling success while others take the spotlight. That doesn't have to continue. A well-designed launch communication strategy can change everything. It transforms how the organization sees medical affairs, from a supportive function to a strategic leader of scientific narratives and scientific excellence. We have discussed how communication should not only reach the external audience, which are the key opinion leaders, the healthcare professionals, and scientific communities, but also engage our internal stakeholder leadership, access, regulatory, commercial colleagues, because the launch excellence happens when everyone inside and outside the organization speaks the same scientific language, inspired by the same vision. And remember this, visibility is not self-promotion. It's leadership. When you invite others to witness your medical initiatives, share your progress, and take part in your scientific journey, you are not just earning recognition, you are building belief and trust. Belief in the power of science. That's how medical affairs shapes perception and strengthens trust and leads with influence. So, to help you apply what we have discussed today, I have prepared a PDF framework for the medical affairs teams to include the launch communication strategy, which outlines every phase, the pre-launch, launch, and post-launch, for both internal and external audience. I think it's a practical tool that you can use to design, communicate, and measure your own medical communication plan with confidence and structure. So take this framework, adapt it to your organization, and let it guide you through your next launch. Because when you do so, and when medical teams communicate effectively, the science shines, the strategy succeeds, and the impact is finally seen and celebrated. So best of luck in your next launch, and see you next time. Thank you.